There's a vegan restaurant up in Tahoe called 𝐊𝐵 that does like,
I love that place.
Oh my God, I'm obsessed. It's down the street from my house. And I don't understand. I mean, I love vegetables, but I don't understand how they make food that tastes as good as their food tastes. Like it's just so good. So we went there for brunch. And I have a little side project. I'm opening a restaurant with a friend in my spare time. So we had to go over 37 pages of our shareholders agreement with a highlighter.
Oh yeah, you were opening
the Grumpy Dumpling.
Yeah, where would you open it?
The spot is on the entrance is on 𝐂𝐀𝐀𝐍𝐆, but like down at the end where it like curves down towards the lake. So you come in on the main part of 𝐂𝐀𝐀𝐍𝐆, but then the back of the restaurant is a wall-to-wall glass view of Westlake facing west into the sunset. So it is pretty much perfect for the wine that I'm hoping to sell in very large quantities to make the rent affordable.
We have our first attendee, guys.
Yay!
Hi.
Hello. Welcome.
Hi.
Even though we can't see you, but we appreciate you.
We know you're there and we're very excited.
I made my coffee, but I have to wait for it to cool down because we don't have any ice at Spark Bread. And
you don't have ice?
No.
Don't you employ, if you employ Americans, you need to have ice because we put ice in like everything.
Our fridge is very weak. Oh, where's Sam?
She's just like, actually, never mind.
Oh, she just turned off the thing, the camera. Oh my God. I was so... And then after the tooth extraction, they recommended you for the next like 2 to 3 days, do not eat hot food because it might, like warm up the, what you call it, like
the sutures, like the stitches.
Yeah. So
you really have to like, you have to sit and like, you have to actually wait for that coffee like to become room temperature.
Yes, that's why I'm like, I'm looking at you sipping your coffee. I'm like, I can smell mine, but I can't sip it. It smells so good. Oh my goodness.
I know. It is an important part of the afternoon for sure. But I'm glad that you're sort of like the extraction went well.
It went so well. Look at my face. This is Sunday. I had it on Friday morning, and you can't really see any like swelling whatsoever. I feel fine.
Yeah, I remember Zoe and I were having an interview on Friday and she couldn't even talk.
Because you know when
on Friday?
Yeah, but I didn't show my camera and I didn't say anything. I was
what kind of interviews do you guys do?
It's for our essay contest.
Okay.
So we have like a short list, and then we need to interview the short list to kind of get to know them better and see, and understand the writing process. So it was very fun. But then I was just like, I'm in pain.
Yeah, that's very impressive. Even as a passive member of the like judging crew, I'm pretty sure I would just be watching Netflix for like the 10 hours after anything like that. Drinking smoothies.
I had a very good dentist, I must say. He made it very easy for me. Yeah. Oh, we have 7 attendees already.
Woo.
We'll wait until we'll give people some time to go into the link. Probably will start with our content at 2:10 or 3:10 or 3:15. Hi, everyone that just joined us. We're very excited to have you here. I feel like this is Chang. Oh, if this is the first time you join a webinar, we do have the Q&A here. If you can see my screen, type in your question there and we'll try to answer it at the end. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we promise we're going to save some time for those. Even those of us who are a little on the chatty side, we know that the question and answer part is important, and we will keep it focused so that we get to as many as we can.
Also, Zoe's here to keep us in check. So
yeah,
don't worry.
She's just going to turn off our microphone if we go too long.
I don't think I have that power.
Really? I think muting people would be like the best part of a meeting on Zoom. Being able to be like, okay, and that's enough from you.
I do.
Thank you so much, Cristina.
I'm sorry. I see somebody that tried to raise their hand, but we're not open for Q&A yet. So
you definitely type in the questions that you have, and we will save all of them to the end. But hi, maybe they were just waving at us.
Okay, but that is the function called raising hand. Raise your hand. All right. Oh, and Cristina, I do. Some of our students got their March SAT canceled. Do you have the same problem?
I had one. What was it? I think was it the Wellspring?
Oh yeah,
location.
Mm-hmm.
That was I had one kid who was taking it there, who had it canceled, but it was a 10th. I think it was a 10th grader. So it was like, oh darn, we'll have to register for May. Not like, oh my God, my life is over. My whole plan has been changed kind of drama. So far that's been it. But it was also like it was quite a couple weeks ago that happened.
Last I think it was like early last week. And then we have several students in Ho Chi Minh City
that had cancellations as well.
Yeah, most testing sites in Ho Chi Minh City cancel.
Yeah, I think some of them, or at least one of them, was postponed instead of canceled. But yeah, most of them are canceled.
Yeah, I mean, Ho Chi Minh, they're still a little bit more careful. Like they're still worrying a bit more than Hanoi is, right? Like things are still in the process of opening back up, whereas here things are sort of back to normal a little bit.
Yeah. I heard that you had to quarantine at home for 14 days if you fly from Hanoi to Ho Chi Minh City, but I don't know if that's so true right now. My friends definitely had to.
Really?
My friend had to quarantine and work from home because she came from Hanoi.
I mean, I had a friend who was traveling right after Tet, and when they asked her what district in Hanoi where she's like from, and they basically compared it to the list of like where all the live cases were, which was unfortunate because there was that one guy in Teho who actually passed away, and she lives technically in Teho district, but like on the other side of the lake, because Teho district goes all the way around the lake, and so she lives on like Lac Long Quan, and he was on Swansea or Teho Street, and it's still what they were like, oh, wrong district, you cannot, like, you may not, no flying for you. They told her that she was planning on flying to Da Nang, and they were like, well, if you fly, you're gonna have to quarantine when you get here. She's like, well, I guess I'm not coming to Da Nang for 4 days.
I haven't heard about it, and I'm flying to Saigon this weekend.
You might want to ask someone about that.
Yeah.
Unless what you're looking for is like a 14-day hotel holiday.
Who can I ask though?
I think she called like the airport, like the airport there. Like well, she was going to Da Nang, but I think she called the airport there. Like there's one of the numbers in the phone menu is like, for health and immigration or whatever. And she was like, okay, well, I'm coming from Hanoi. Is there going to be any issues? Because I think it was them who are like, where have you been and what are you doing? I think it was an office that she was able to get a hold of.
Okay.
Because otherwise, like, I don't care how nice the hotel room is. 2 weeks is a long time to sit in one room. Like,
and yeah, I'm flying to Saigon for a few meetings, so I would not want to be in a hotel room for 14 days.
And then have those meetings.
Yeah, and then my trip is only like 4 days long.
Well, it would actually, like, you would end up probably flying down there, and then you do the meeting on Zoom from this hotel room also in Ho Chi Minh City, which would be ironic. Though, funny story, one of my PhD qualifying examinations, they require that you do them in, like, on campus. So I was living in Hanoi at that time, and I was supposed to fly back to Madison, Wisconsin in January to take this 5-hour exam. That's the only reason I was going back. I like had to fly across the world to take a 5-hour written test, and then I was going to basically spend 2 days and then come back. And I flew in and got to Chicago, which was my transfer. And then there was this like crazy blizzard that had been named like the snow apocalypse or whatever. And this was like 3 or 4 years ago, but they rerouted me to like New York. I got stuck in some, like, I mean, I'm from New York, but it was like in a place that I wasn't supposed to be. And I ended up getting emergency approval to take the test online when they had refused that to me beforehand. So I basically took a trip to America to sit in a hotel room and take the same test that I really, really could have taken from like my house here in Hanoi. It was very frustrating. So that's what would happen to you, Zoe. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
And I passed it, which was very exciting.
Woo,
all that
congrats.
Stress. Yeah. It's a very expensive test.
Yeah.
My supervisor also attending this
Very-
webinar right now. She just texted me, "Did you buy the ticket?" I got in trouble. Hello, Tia. I cannot promote Ming Chang to a panelist for some reason. Yeah, so okay. We'll give it another 5 minutes and then we'll start again.
Cool.
Do you like coffee, Christina? I'm guessing you do because you're sipping on yours right now.
I love it so much.
Yeah.
Actually, fun fact, I did not drink coffee at all until I came to Vietnam for the first time, and accidentally ordered, I was 19 or 20, and I ordered a no da instead of a cha da because I was like learning the language. And then I was so embarrassed that I had ordered the wrong thing that I was just like, well, I'm going to drink it because I don't want to tell the waitress that I don't know any words. And from then on, I am a daily coffee drinker. So.
Well, because you chose no da, which is like the best coffee.
Yeah, it's like a milkshake.
Anyway.
It's amazing.
I really admire people who take their coffee black because I can never be.
I also think it's a little bit, I like to think of like people who drink like black coffee, especially without sugar, as like a real power play. Like you're a serious, intense, like kind of badass person. If you drink black coffee, it's like no frills. I want the caffeine. Just give me the hot liquid. I find that like really impressive.
I will need my cream. I need my sugar. I need my condensed milk. I need, yeah.
Yeah. With that condensed milk, I would rather just take it black because I don't really like the cream that comes with the coffee.
Cream.
That
Oh my
creamer,
goodness.
I'm just not a big fan.
When I was in college, I spent so much money just trying to find the best creamer there is.
That's a really weird thing to like sample all the options in.
What's the hazelnut creamer?
No, flavored coffee is like, I'm sorry, flavored coffee is for like retired women. Like, what are you doing?
No, I love.
You are younger than me.
I love sweet. I cannot deal with bitterness. I love spicy food, but I love sweet food. So every time, like when people offer me like black coffee, I'm like, no,
thank you. So I'm trying to like shift to non-dairy milks. And the problem with them is they all taste like whatever they're made out of. Like if it's almond milk, it just kind of tastes almondy. And if it's oat milk, they're not great. But trying to shift to it, and I'm getting kind of used to it now, so I don't really notice it in coffee anymore. But it's quite funny because my husband will accidentally take a sip of mine and just be like, "Oh, like, this is terrible." So I think I'm forgetting what it tastes like with regular cream because I'm quite used to it. But in the beginning, I was not excited. So
I love soy milk, but I'm still not used to putting my soy milk in
coffee.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also find it sad that there aren't a lot of milk alternatives in Hanoi, you know, in coffee places. We just use dairy milk, whole milk.
There like a lot of, I mean, I guess I live up in Tahoe where there's like the percentage of people who are like vegan and vegetarian is like ridiculous because we have a bit of a hippie community. But most of them will do soy milk. The cafe that I go to makes their own oat milk, which sounds really great when you think of like, you know, no packaging and no processing and like it's like natural and it's made every day, but it's not great. Like I'm assuming that none of them are watching this presentation. It's not delicious.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we should start because it's 3:10. 1 minute for people that are coming in late. They can still follow our slide, I suppose.
Yeah, people will probably filter in.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today, where we'll be addressing some of the most commonly asked questions by students in grade 10 and 11 as they kickstart the application process. I am Zoe, SparkRep's Admission Enrollment Manager, and I will be your moderator today. Our speakers today are Cristina Bain, CEO of Cristina Bain Consulting, and Sam Nguyen, one of SparkRep coaches. Both speakers today have had extensive experience working with Vietnamese students on the college application, and I'm super happy to have them with us today. To start off, Cristina and Sam, can you please tell us more about your background and your experience regarding admission coaching? Cristina, do you mind going first?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Cristina, as mentioned. My academic background is almost exclusively in the social sciences. I studied sociology and political science in undergrad at Hobart William Smith College, and then sociology and economics for my master's and PhD work at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Two schools that are amazing, but are literally the opposite in size and style. So it was a really interesting sort of opportunity for me to observe the many different forms of education in the US. I worked in admissions for Hobart William Smith for 1.5 years, starting while I was still a student and then continuing a bit after. And I have been in Hanoi now doing admissions consulting for 7 years. And as I say that, I think, oh my God, 7 years, it's gone by very quickly. I have had my own company doing one-on-one work for about 4.5. And much like my fellow teammates here at SparkRep, focus on very sort of personalized advising and mentorship and helping people sort out what it is that they want to do with themselves. Sam.
Great, thank you. So my name is Sam. I am an academic tutor and coach at SparkRep. I've been with SparkRep for 3 years, which also is a really long time, considering that I'm still finger crossed young. I studied English Lit and Linguistic at Northwestern University in the greater Chicago area. It's actually Evanston, but I say Chicago because people don't really know where Evanston is. Well, I usually work at SparkRep with students on a lot of the extracurricular activities, helping them develop their interests, helping them hone their personal and transferable skills, which I think is the topic of our webinar today. So yeah, it's great. Very excited to talk to you guys about that.
Thank you both. Before we officially start today, I just have a quick poll to see where our students are from. I will launch the poll now, and hopefully you can see it. You can click and choose and select the grade that you're in. Oh, thank you.
I would say if just in case there's a parent here, if you aren't one of these, but you're like watching because you're interested for your son or daughter, maybe choose the one that they are, so we make sure to give the best and most accurate advice to the people who are watching, because 9th graders have lots of time to plan things, and you 11th graders, time to get to work.
And if you're in 12th grade, we can talk about gap year plans if that's what you need. All right, waiting on some more people. Well, only half of the attendees have answered the question. But yeah, I'll go ahead and end this poll. Thank you for doing this. It's helpful for us to know the demographic of our audience today. Here. Just a quick result for everyone to see.
10 and 11.
Yeah, a lot of great 10. Good job, you guys.
Yeah, you are prepared. I love it.
Okay. Well, to go into the first topic of the discussion today, one of the most frequently questioned, that we have been asked by students is regarding extracurricular activities, right? Students have asked me, oh, will 10 activities be enough? Or will I do this and that project? How does it look on me? And, oh, can I start a club? And I think to be able to answer these questions, we should ask ourselves really what exactly university and colleges are looking for when they look into our resume or activity list, right? Sam, can you please share your thoughts on this question?
We need to scoot to the next slide.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Zoe, for passing on to me. So yeah, there are a couple of transferable skills that Cristina and I will talk about today, but let me first start with time management, which I definitely believe is one of the most important skills that one can ever have in life. Not just for high school, not just for college, but definitely in the future as well, until the end of time. So time management is very important because, probably as high school students, you realize this, but you're constantly managing a lot of different moving parts at the same time. Maybe you have to go to school, you have coursework, but you're also doing clubs and activities. You also want to hang out with friends and spend time with family. So there are a lot of things that you're doing at the same time, things that you have to think about. So time management means that you know how to allocate your time to each task wisely. So you're not spending a lot of time on maybe a minor task, or maybe you're not stressing out because you haven't budgeted enough time for a major project, for example. So knowing to manage your time, knowing to designate a certain amount of time to task appropriately would really help you work efficiently to maximize your efficiency and your potential. But it's not only about being able to do as many things as you can, right? Because that's unhealthy. We want to be able to relax as well, watch Netflix, eat ramen, slowly wash dishes, etc., right? So we want to enjoy these little things in life. So time management is also about having a work-life balance, right? Now that you're in high school, maybe you want to be able to get good grades in school and also do other activities and also have fun with friends. And same with in college, you're going to be, for most schools in the US, you choose to be full-time on campus, you spend time with friends in the dorms, and there are other activities in residence halls as well. And you want to have time for that because, you're already going to be super busy during the semester. So time management is also about reaching this balance, about being able to tell, okay, this is most important to me right now. This is the project that I need to spend time on, instead of, productive procrastination and do a bunch of other things when you have an exam due tomorrow. So yeah, definitely that I would like to emphasize time management. This is one of the skills that I talk a lot about to my students at Spark Prep as well, because a lot of them are, very excited and young and full of potential, but they're just maybe biting a little bit more than they can chew. So definitely keep this in mind as you build your applications, as you start on your applications.
Sam, I do have a follow-up question
Yes.
because you were talking a lot about, how to manage your task wisely and allocate time to those, right? What tools that you use to do that, and do you have any tips for students who are, handling many projects at once?
Yeah, definitely. So tools, that's my favorite things. I use iCalendar because so I use a MacBook, and it's really useful because I can have like multiple desktops running at the same times, and I have one fixed desktop like with my calendar so that I can like always see that what's going on with my day. And Todoist, which you can use any sort of to-do list task, but I use Todoist. I have like lists for each major task that I'm in. So I have a list for Spark Prep, I have a list for my passion project, I have a list for other stuff that's going on in my life. And then I also have a to-do list, which means everything that I have to complete today. Yeah, so it's really useful because I can see ahead in time, but I can also see the small details, right? I have a bigger picture of, of what I'm doing of this project in particular, but also it is very important to be attentive to details, to say, okay, today I have like 5 things on the list. I need to budget like 1 hour for this and have an hour for that.
Right.
It's really useful to sort of systematize the things that you have to do, so that, nothing is like slipping from the crack, and then you can actually complete everything that you have to do in the day. So I definitely would recommend using calendar, like just so that you don't forget an important event you have to attend. For example, this webinar is an important event that you should not forget to attend. Definitely.
Once you put it in your calendar. Well, Christina, I also seen your workload, and I'm very impressed with how you handle, so many tasks. Can you share about some tips and tools that you use too?
So if we're talking about programs, I'm actually really old-fashioned, and the act of like writing down a handwritten list and then like crossing it off is one of the more gratifying things that I have. And like clicking the done button for me doesn't like evoke the same like sense of accomplishment. So I have like a really old-fashioned like day planner that I have for with my like basically the same tasks that I have to get done today. And then like the due date for something would go in that specific day. But then for work stuff, I actually have just moved over to a program called Monday.com, which I'm currently in love with, because you can set deadlines for things, but also prioritize them. And the program will basically put things in the order of importance based on how you code them. And I am accepting a little bit of technology in my life in that way. But one of the things that I did when I was younger, like when I was in school, was I would take the lists, much like Sam is talking about, and take about 10 minutes every morning to look at what it is that I had coming and what gaps I had. So if I saw that there was, 45 minutes before I had my SAT class that was sort of free, and I look at the things that I have to get done for today, I could be like, oh, you know what, I only need a half hour to write that email to that person. I'm going to put that in that spot, and kind of lets you use your time really effectively.
Yeah.
Hey, those are very helpful. Sorry, back to Sam. Sam, would you mind talking about the next point? Oh.
Yeah. So thank you, Christina, for sharing your tips too. And the second thing that I want to talk about is teamwork and coordination, which again is going to be super helpful for you in college, because you know what, in the US, they really like teamwork and group projects. At least from my experience, I've had to do a group like paper before for one of my English classes, and you cannot imagine how difficult that was, writing a paper together. Which is why working in your ability to be a team player, your coordinating skills is very important, because most of the time it's not like you're gonna work alone, like when you go into college, again, you have group projects. When you're out into the workforce, you have to work with a bunch of other people, and you need to be able to show that you can be a part of a team, right? That you can contribute. It's not like you're always talking over others. You don't want to always be telling others what to do, right? You also need to listen, active listening. You also need to be able to give constructive criticism, right? And this all falls under teamwork and coordination. definitely something important for you to think about. And also working in groups will push you to think outside the box more often, hone your creative problem solving skills. So when you're in a team with other people, it really pushes knowledge forward. So definitely it's an opportunity for you to hone your creative problem solving skills as well. And here's something also very important. I mentioned the ability to be an active listener in a team. Definitely, again, important because you don't want to be telling other what to do. You also want to be considering other people's opinions. And this sort of also relates to your ability to communicate, right? To express your opinions, express your needs. But now that we're on communication, we also need to be able to communicate professionally. Cristina, do you have any other tips for us on that?
Yeah, I'd love to talk about communication a bit more. So one of the things that I find when I talk to young people is that they see communication in high school as predominantly like functional, right? So if you're sending an email to someone to turn in your homework assignment, you attach a document or you share a link and like you send it to them, and that is sort of taken care of. And one of the things that schools like to see in terms of maturity and professionalism is this idea of communication as more of an impression that you get to give people, whether that's in person or on email or on the phone, right? So learning strong communication skills and being able to present yourself in a way that says like, I'm a grown-up, I'm handling things, I know how to communicate effectively and efficiently, I'm professional, I'm excited about your school. All of these things are almost like a subtext in most of your communications. And it's something that obviously you don't really learn in high school because most of your interactions with teachers are in person and in a large group setting. So even when you're just submitting an assignment or asking someone for clarification about a project, every time you communicate, you have the opportunity to use that to sort of say a bit about who you are, to show them what kind of student and what kind of professional you're going to be. And this is a skill that takes a bit of practice and a bit of finessing, but it has a great potential to kind of indicate to the school that you're like ready to take your education seriously. And I think it's an opportunity that a lot of young people don't like figure out until they get to school. So like in that way, it's a bit of an opportunity missed. To kind of continue on that, I want to, since the theme here is that we're talking about transferable skills, as someone who's been in like the professional working world for a while now, because I'm a bit older than my co-panelists, communication skills are key in every job that you're going to have. It doesn't matter if you're interested in computer engineering or in sociology or in biochemistry. All of these people need to communicate within their team, but also with other members of the company that they're working for, with potential clients. Communication is one of those things that if you're not good at it, you miss a lot of opportunities that you may not even be aware of. So that one, anyone who works with me we spend a lot of time talking about communication skills. The other one that I wanted to bring up, the word that we use for it was progressive responsibility. When you're building an activities list, you are going to have lots and lots of options for the kinds of things that you can do, the kinds of activities you can be involved in, the projects you can start, the clubs, the internships. There's a lot of things. You don't have to be in a leadership role in everything. Things are valuable without you being in a leadership role. But what schools like to see is that you are looking to take on increasing levels of responsibility and complexity as you go through something. So if you start in 9th grade with a volunteering project and you are just helping organize supplies, maybe the following year you ask to be in charge of a project, or the following year you work on the marketing team for the project and you are in charge of social media, to sort of slowly work your way up so that you are taking on a little bit more and a little bit more. They want to see that you're pushing yourself to grow and learn new things, because this is what they're going to want you to do when you're on campus. So getting to show that kind of attitude towards all of your activities, whether it's a creative one or a club sport, that energy or attitude is really important. And so you don't have to be in a leadership role in everything, but the idea of kind of pushing yourself to take on a little bit more responsibility in the things that you do and the things that you love it's really good.
Yeah. If I can add a little bit more on that, definitely agree, Cristina, that you don't always have to be a leader in a group, right? Because you can show your commitment, you can show your responsibility in any kind of roles. And honestly, I don't think that leadership is necessarily a position. It's a process, right? It's what you show. It's your again, your commitment, your responsibility. So I definitely totally agree with you on that. And I think it's a myth that a lot of students are, you know, holding dear to, right? You have to be founding a project, or you have to be co-president or something like that to be a leader, but not necessarily, right? You could be a team member, but you're contributing to your project and you're making decisions that move the work forward. That's leadership.
Yeah,
I totally agree.
I agree with that completely. And now that we understand more about what colleges are looking for when they look at our activity list, you know, which are the key transferable skills that we just talked about, we can start discussing extracurricular activity development for grade 10 and 11 students. Let's see on the next slide. Cristina, do you want to start sharing our topic?
Yes. Okay. So one of the things, and I'm not going to blame the 10th and 11th graders watching us because your lives are busy and complicated. But one of the things that I think is really important to sort of remind yourself of is the connection between the short-term things that you have going on in your life and the long-term goals that you have for yourself, right? We get often really bogged down in the test that's coming up next week. Shout out to everyone taking the March SAT. The homework assignment that you have due on Monday, the project that you have coming up, and those things end up feeling like the most emergency things in your life. And so therefore they take up the majority of your consciousness. I'm not saying that that's wrong, but I am saying that it is really important to kind of ground the work that you're doing on a day-to-day and week-to-week basis in this long-term plan that you need to have for yourself. Like, where is it that what kind of schools do you want to go to? What kind of students are they seeking? What kind of job do you want? What kind of skills do you need to build? Like, those long-term goals need step-by-step movement. And unless you kind of focus on that step-by-step movement with the goal in sight, you can sometimes kind of get a little bit, I don't want to say lost, but like a little bit distracted from that long-term goal. I think that plan, the A, B, C, D, all the way to the end, right, needs to be really personal and needs to reflect the goals that you have. And so making sure and reevaluating and reflecting on the things that you're doing and thinking about how they fit into the goals that you have is something that I think is really important. Do you want me to jump straight into the second point on the list?
Yeah, please.
Great. Okay, so the other thing is that we are all quite complex people. We have lots of different things about ourselves. I love cooking, but I also love yoga, and I also love reading, and I also love taking pictures of my cats, which I don't think counts as an extracurricular, but really should, because I dedicate like time to it. Schools are looking for you to show who you are, and they understand that most of us are dynamic, kind of multifaceted people who have lots of stuff, and they don't all have to fit together. So if you're someone who's planning on studying biomedical engineering, you don't have to just have activities that relate to that one thing. You may also love playing the ukulele, and you may also be like a champion ping pong player, or even just like an okay ping pong player. So what I like to think about is developing almost like certain traits and abilities, and like being comfortable with those going off in different directions. So the ones that are really important to me would be critical thinking, creative expression, intellectual curiosity, like engagement in your community, and like civic responsibility, putting whatever your major is, whatever you think your major is, into practice in some way, experiencing other cultures. And these may not look the same for everybody. Like, anyone who knows me knows that I cannot play a single song on a single instrument of any type, right? My creative expression would definitely not be any kind of music because I am terrible. But I really do like drawing, and I really do like 3D art, like sculpture and like clay and pottery, right? So we all have our own ways of exploring these categories, but working to sort of develop all the facets of who you are rather than to just do like the one thing that you are focusing on, I think is really important.
Wow. Yeah, I totally agree with you, Christina. Definitely on the what you said about, people having different just different things that fit them better, right? Different avenues for them to express their interest, express their commitment. And I definitely agree with that because I don't think there's any one size that fits all, especially when it comes to this college application, because we're all different individuals. We have different interests, we have different talents, different path that we want to follow. So yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think that the right questions or not, maybe not the one single right question, but a question that I would encourage my student to ask, and I would encourage everyone else here as well, is to think about what would facilitate growth rather than what would impress the admission office, right? Because we want this opportunity to be a time for you to grow, to develop as a person, as an individual, not just, trying to do all these things, try to cram in more clubs, more activities, trying to found more organizations, just impress someone, right? I want my students to come out of their application, come out of this experience and looking back and think, wow, I've grown so much. I've, become a champion ping pong player when I was just an okay. So really just think about what would facilitate growth. Okay, who I am right now, where am I at? And how can I grow? How can I develop my values a little bit more? How can I grow more as an individual, right? And that's the important thing, because I think that, again, like you said, there are different ways for us to show our commitment, right? As long as we're showing that we can commit, that we can take an interest and develop it, and we're willing to put the time and effort into that, I think that's what the admission office is looking for, right? Yeah. I remember a long time ago when I was a high school student, I was really into poetry. I don't know, I've been to poetry for as long as I can remember. And so I just wanted to publish a collection. I'm like, I love my friends, I love my family, I want to write something for them. So I wrote every day a poem. And then some I liked, some I didn't like. And I just keep revising and revising. And then I published a collection at the end of my high school years as in honor of my friends and family. And so that was definitely something that helped me develop, that helped me grow. And looking back, I'm like, whoa, I've just come so far. And I definitely think that that's the kind of activities that I would like to encourage my students to do, is to think about, who are you? Who am I? Like, what are my values? What is most important to me? For example, for me, my friendship's very important to me. And also, creative expression and perseverance. So all of these things, I try to sort of combine them and express them and show them in the activities that I choose to engage in. And definitely, I think that, students can sit down, really think about, these are my formative experiences so far. This is a person that I want to be. This is the person that I am now. And try to work towards that goal, try to work towards that growth and the values that they embrace. Yeah, so definitely, I don't think that there is a single formula that I can give to everyone that would guarantee them a spot in, top schools or their dream schools. Like, I don't think that's possible. But there is, I think, a way for us to all reach new heights relative to each of us, is to think about how we can grow. Because, having that goal set in mind, that's already half the way. Now you just need to actually, not saying that actually doing it is easy, but at least now you have a motivation to do it, right? Because you have your goals in mind.
I actually just want to chime in on that, because I think you're totally right. And I've been thinking, I was like, the word that keeps coming to my mind as I listen to you is this idea of authenticity, and how, like, if a student comes in and asks me, like, how to impress a college, one of the things that's really hard but true is that the answer is, like, people are impressed and attracted to authenticity. If you are someone who is open and honest about who you are in your activities, in your writing, in your existence, in the way that you engage in all of your many communities, we as readers, as your mentors, and the admissions committee as the people who are interpreting you, you can feel authenticity, you can feel honesty. But it's really not something that you can fake, and it's not something that like you can't, the only way to be authentic is to be authentic, right? Like I can't give you a list of things that make you seem authentic because they won't fit you and they won't come across the same way. And one of the things that I really love about the years I've spent like talking to admissions reps is how good they get, the ones especially who've been doing it for a long time, at just kind of like feeling something from an application that's mostly paper, right? And being able to connect to it. And they really have almost a developed sixth sense for the students who are being honest and authentic and like true to their values and true to their growth and their process. And so there isn't an easy formula for that. The formula is like, go out into the world and figure out who you are. And like, that's a big process and super scary for someone who's 17, 18, I understand. But like, that's really, that's what they want. And that's what, of course, we want as people is to figure out who we are and to like, try to put that into play.
Yeah. And I definitely think that, you know, that's such a big question for 17, 18-year-olds. Like, who am I? Like
such a scary one.
Sounds like an existential crisis, but I definitely think that as long as you're saying to your interests, that's a good place to start, right? You don't need to necessarily know who you are because you constantly evolve, you constantly grow, right? That's because we can grow. We can think about what will facilitate growth. But definitely don't try to just do what everyone else is doing because you think that might impress someone else. But, you know, have fun, do what you're passionate about, and yeah.
Yeah, thank you, ladies. Those have been extremely helpful because I think many students, especially Vietnamese students, do have that, you know, misconception of, you know, doing as many as they can and maybe for the sake of having a long list of activities.
Right.
And I think we really need to approach activities in a different way, in a different thinking. Anyway, moving on to the next topic is, as you all know,
hopefully you know.
Earlier this year, College Board has made an announcement of no longer offering the SAT subject test or the SAT with essay for international students. They offered 2 last test dates this May and June. Cristina and Sam, what did this mean for our students who have some of the tests already and for those who do not have the test yet?
Yeah, so what Sam and I are going to do is we're going to kind of divide and conquer this one. I want to start by talking about the possibility of squeezing in tests in May and June, since it's just the beginning of March and, you know, you don't have anything else to do with your time right now. So if you've already been studying for the SAT, if you were planning on taking it in May or June, if you had already kind of signed up for a class, or if you've been self-studying and you were thinking about doing that, my general advice would be that, like, if you're prepping for it already, go forth. Admissions committees are not going to devalue it when they look at applications this year, because it is going to be something that a large percentage of the applicants still have. It'll be in future years. So maybe like the 10th graders and the 9th graders here, where it is less and less important. So if you're an 11th grader who's been studying for it, or if you're a 10th grader who's been studying for it, getting these in, if you can do well without kind of throwing your entire spring and plan into a giant messy pile, I would do it. Now, that means that you're not going to probably have a backup test. If you take the SAT 2 in June, you get 1 shot, and that puts a little bit of extra pressure. My advice to everyone that I work with is that, as much as I understand that having a score and a number to sort of focus on is like feels really safe and feels really important, it is only one of many things that they are going to be looking at. So injuring your GPA because you are studying for the SAT 2 does not make any sense. Giving up your extracurriculars because you're studying for the SAT 2 does not make any sense. You have all these other things to think about. You should be developing your writing. You should be working on making sure your grades are as high as they can be. All of this is about balance. But if you were planning on taking it, you should probably continue. And if you're really strong in some of the SAT 2 subjects, you might be able to do pretty well by the time May or June comes. The most popular tests that I see Vietnamese students taking are the math 2 test, the physics, the chemistry, and then maybe I think after that comes bio and then American history, which always kind of surprises me. But if you have a really strong grade in physics, you might actually be able to get a pretty good score on the physics test by this spring. So I don't think you should discount it if you were planning on taking it anyways, but I really highly recommend not destroying the rest of your plan because like this, you feel like this is like the rushed item, because it is now like entirely optional and sort of being phased out. If you've already taken it once or twice and you are planning on using this spring as like your final attempt, then obviously I would keep it, because the schools are going to be looking at whatever material we submit, and those tests will still be a part of that their sort of read or interpretation of you, because it is still a test that a lot of people are going to have.
Yeah, definitely I agree. If you already, again, have some experience with the SAT2, it might be useful to squeeze in some. An alternative that I've seen a lot of Vietnamese students choose is the AP exams. AP stands for Advanced Placement, which is an exam that is initially or originally offered by the College Board, and still are offered by the College Board, mostly in North America, so the US and Canada. But a lot of international students have also been taking the exams. And, you know, this AP exam is just college level curricula and examinations offered to high school students for them to demonstrate that they have the ability and the capacity to perform well in certain subjects. They can also get college credits by taking these exams and scoring a certain level. So you like on a scale of 5, if you get a 4 or 5, you can get college credit for that particular subject. Personally, I'm not too big of a fan of the exams on their own. And I have nothing against the exam. I'm just saying that without the benefit of the accompanying coursework, I think that the AP exam is just another standardized exams, very similar to SAT2. However, what is the most beneficial thing about the AP, I think, is the coursework, is the academic environment that you can be a part of when you actually take the class. And you don't need to take a class in order to take the exams, but I would highly encourage you not to do that, right? To actually study the materials in a class, you know, with other people, so you can talk to other about it, interact with friends, engage with teachers, embody, like to fully be immersed in the knowledge would definitely, I think, be more, would facilitate more growth than just taking the exam on its own. Because yes, you can cram for a couple of months and take the AP exam, which is only offered in May every year. But what would that bring to you in particular? You know, and I think that really consider other options as well, instead of just the AP exams, instead of just cramming for another standardized test, might, you know, bring you more values, more meanings to your career. So you can maybe check out research opportunities. You know, maybe if you're interested in psychology, you could do a mini research project on the subject. You can do research with other people, or you can just do like independent projects on your own, do some reading, get some books, teach yourself, things that further your interests. Or you can also consider other maybe summer programs or something about the topics that you're interested in, about the subject that you're interested in, that might bring more value than just studying for standardized test. Christina, do you have any other options that you can recommend?
I think your list is pretty extensive. I mean, there are some really cool online classes, both for credit and like ones that are more like edX and Coursera, where you kind of get to dive into a subject, but you're not necessarily like doing homework and assignments. I think ultimately, depending on what you study and what you're planning on studying, the options in front of you is really different. You know, the students that talk to me about wanting to study aeronautical engineering aren't going to have the same like options that a student who is interested in economics would. So in some ways, like it's going to depend person to person. But I think the most important thing, not to have us kind of keep bringing everything back to like your goals and your values, but I'm going to anyways. The purpose of these SAT subject tests in the bigger picture is, and the purpose of the AP test is to demonstrate like intellectual rigor and academic like drive, right? That you are really good at a subject, that you are conquering material, that you're curious, that you're smart, that you are interested in a subject enough to like learn a lot about it and to develop a body of knowledge. That is not something that comes in one form. It's something that comes in a bunch of different forms. And all the things that Sam mentioned before are great examples of that. And depending on you and your strengths and like who you know and who your advisor knows and like what your schedule is like, there are, there's going to be a different thing that is suitable for different people. But remember, the goal is not to get, I mean, with the SAT2, the best score is an 800. The goal isn't the 800. The goal is like a demonstration that you've like conquered biology, or a demonstration that you know like a lot of math. I did not do good on the math SAT subject test, so like I'm just going to admit that. So like we often with these tests, I think we kind of forget that they are actually supposed to be a demonstration of your academic rigor and intellectual like energy for new things. And once you remember that that's actually the goal, there's myriad ways that you can achieve that.
Yeah, I do really agree with you guys about first of all the AP exam and how there's many other options that students can do, especially when your school do not offer AP courses. And relating just to this, right? Because Sam and Christina, you guys have mentioned many interesting options like research and internship in summer programs. Can you guys give more like some example of your students or some project that you have done before to show us students, some of the ways that they can go about it? Christina, do you want to start?
Yeah, so actually I have a couple of students who just graduated. Well, actually now it's not just anymore because it's March. So like graduated last year, who did a project that was like sort of, they were interested in computer science and web design, but they specifically brought in a member of their team, like a friend of theirs who was much more interested in sort of the social sciences. And they created a website that allowed, it was like to connect farmers who were working in some of the in some of the nearby regions that have really great produce of a specific type. Like if you go to Ninh you buy these these vegetables and from these places, and they're to connect them with people here who are interested in purchasing stuff directly from farmers, so sort of taking out the middleman. And so it was a project in technology, right? And they had to develop this site and connect people, but it was also about beyond being about the technology, it was also like learning about sourcing of things and sort of the logistics of it, and going out on the weekends and making connections with people in that region. And by bringing people together, it ended up being not just a computer science project, because website design is sort of one facet of something, but actually something that required teammates of different skills. And I remember what I actually think was maybe the most interesting learning experience for them was having a team of students interested in very different majors and how they work together, right? If you put 3 kids who are interested in coding on the same team, they have a lot of the same interests and a lot of the same skill sets. But when you add someone who's like interested in studying economics and someone who's interested in studying economic development on that team, it's actually quite different. And so the way that they had to learn to work together was really trying at times, but eventually successful. And what was really cool about it was that they kept running into new things that they had to teach themselves, right? So like the guys doing the website had to learn how to build a shopping cart. And then the person who was doing like the pricing and the networking with farmers had to learn how to, like, they had to do a bunch of research about how like other projects around the world that do similar things kind of effectively make it work. And so they kind of had to keep going out and finding new things to learn, because they would like come across a problem that they didn't expect. And that's exactly what schools like to see, right? And what helps you become better at eventually the field that you want to study, because in reality, most of the projects you work on professionally are quite complex, and life is quite complex. And so I was really excited to watch them put all of that together. It ended up taking about 2 months longer than they had expected, but that's because projects like this are wildly challenging and really educational. And, you know, I would probably count that as like microfinance, right? Which is one of the AP subjects. And she had to learn a lot about microfinance, but not in the same way that you would by reading the AP microfinance textbook.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. Real life skills is really important, yo. And I think that, I mean, you can get a lot of that from like actually doing a project in that subject rather than just reading it. Because a couple of years ago, I had a student also at Spark Prep who was very interested in linguistics, and she wanted to, you know, research more on that and actually get to know the subject a little bit more, because that's not a subject that Vietnamese curriculum offers. So she chose the Lumiere, which is a 12-week research program that students can do. So there are like recorded lectures and actually opportunities for people to design their own projects and go with it. So my students did a project in linguistics, gender and linguistic in particular. And her final project, the culmination of everything that she'd learned so far in those 12 weeks, was on sort of this gender violence that we see in communications and social media, especially in advertising. So that was really interesting because I got to watch her grow through all of that, watch her read, you know, a huge volume of information, of materials, and synthesizing them, and, you know, coming up with a thesis statement, and all of those other components of a research project, of a research paper. So I definitely think that her ability to do research, to pointedly looking for, to look for information that would be relevant and useful for the project, and to filter them, and to really use evidence from those materials for her argument. Definitely those skills were strengthened, and now she's a freshman in college studying linguistics. So
that's so
turned
cool.
out really well for her.
That's so cool. And I guess the last thing I want to emphasize is that, like, you know, we work with students from a wide variety of backgrounds, and sometimes families have the resources to help you find an academic or professional experience that, like, is not free, right? There are some really amazing programs, both online and in person, around the world that are like immersive and fascinating and really intellectually like challenging. But there are also all kinds of awesome opportunities that you can do with pretty much no budget whatsoever. So what you need to do is sort of think about what you have access to and be aware of the resources that you have, and then to make a plan based on that, because in reality, there's enough options that either way, you'll definitely have options.
Yeah. Thank you guys for a lot of really great examples on how students can demonstrate their intellectual, you know, strength and curiosity. Moving on to the, you know, last topic of the day, you know, Cristina and Sam will share their predictions of changes and trends that student needs to look out for in the upcoming admission cycle 2021, 2022, and how you can best prepare yourself. Sorry, Sam, would you mind?
You're up.
Yeah, definitely. So the first change that, well, we didn't predict this because we've seen this in this cycle, is a dramatic increase in applications, especially to competitive schools. And this is partially attributable to the fact that SAT and ACT are now optional. So this test optional policy really allows people to apply to school, you know, this shoot your shot mentality. Well, yes, that's of course true, right? An increase in application doesn't mean that there's an increase in qualified applications. Maybe, you know, this test optional policy really helps people with social economic barriers, people who didn't have the opportunity to take the tests and submit their applications. But regardless of the reasons behind this increase, there is a crazy increase. We've seen up to 57% increase in the applications to some in some cases, right, to like crazy competitive schools. So maybe this year the rate of admission to Harvard is not 3 to 4%. It could be 1 to 2%. We don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But just be prepared that you're going to be in an increasingly competitive, competition, right? You're submitting your applications along with thousands and thousands and thousands of other people. And I'm guessing that a lot of university will take more time to evaluate and select their applicants, but that also means that you really need to spend time, like, not perfecting, because there's no perfect, but making sure that you're happy with every component of your applications, right? Spending more time on your essays and your writing, right? Because now that tests are optionals, you need to be able to show your ability, your skills, your interests, your passions, your values in different ways. And your essays, that's where you can definitely demonstrate all of those. So this increase in applications will continue. We expect it to continue for a while longer, as test optional policy is still there. So just be prepared.
To continue on the good news train, we're also expecting, because of COVID-19, that the financial aid options for international students is getting increasingly competitive as well. Both because I think the demand for financial aid is increasing, that more families who might not have needed quite as much money as they did need initially are experiencing economic hardship because of parent job issues and therefore are asking for more money. And because, maybe more importantly, school budgets are a little bit in a greater state of flux than they normally would be. You have to realize that if students don't come to campus for an entire semester, or if half the student body doesn't come to campus for a semester, that the schools are relying usually on the tuition and the room and board fees to continue to support the next year's incoming student populations. Though we don't have data on this yet because it's still sort of mid-cycle. From my observations and the people that I've spoken to, especially the larger schools, have had really like slimmer budgets for international students than I've seen in prior years from those same schools. And I think that this is not something that's going to change in the next year or two, because I think that they're dealing with much tighter funding options on their side. Now, you also think about it this way: if you're a student that has a family contribution of $25,000, you're probably asking for $50,000 worth of scholarships. If we look at a school that costs about $75K, right? So you can put together an amazing profile and the school can say, yes, she's worth it, or yes, he's worth it, and we really want this student, and then they offer you that money, which is basically them reserving 4 years of $50,000 in scholarships aside, because they know you're going to need it, and they have to include that in their projection and their budgets. But if COVID continues to be a problem, or if COVID spikes back up again and you can't come, they basically, that money gets kind of wasted, because if you defer your admission and you don't come for a year, they have to keep holding that for you. So their budgets are a confusing mess right now, because some students aren't on campus and therefore are paying partial fees. Some students are deferring and therefore not paying anything. It's a big mess, and international students are the most likely to be unable to come. I have had some admissions people tell me that they are in some ways redirecting a lot of their efforts to other populations of people within the US, because they're worried that if they spend all this money on international students, they're not going to end up coming to campus anyways because of COVID. So I'm not saying that it's impossible or that they're not going to have the funding that you need. That's definitely not the case, but that I do think that in the next year or two, budgets are going to be a bit tighter, and the competition for those scholarships is going to be even more strict and intense than it might have been before. So the funding is definitely something that we're all watching. And I think this is one of the reasons it's really important that whoever you work with is someone who knows a lot about the financial options at the schools that you're applying to, that is in communication with schools, that is kind of doing a lot of research, because the funding is a big part of things. And, for most people, for most families, some scholarships is an important part of whether or not this is going to be viable. So I think that was something that was important before, but now it's even more so.
Yes, thank you. Sam, actually, we were gonna, talk about this next topic before the first one. But one of the question, because tying up to the one of the main topics of today is activities and what students can do to strengthen their profile. And in the years before, we have students, one of the option is, applying to really cool and interesting summer programs, either in the States or in Australia. And, that has also been impacted by COVID. Sam, can you talk more on this?
Yeah, so one of the recommendations that I made earlier, alternatives to the SST2 is summer programs. But sadly, because of COVID and the world is burning right now, this opportunity might be also limited as well. Like Zoe said, usually a lot of universities have pre-collegiate programs, summer programs for high school students to sort of experience their campus and also learn more about certain subjects for a couple of weeks during the summer. And that's usually a great opportunity for students to not only visit schools to experience a little bit of the culture there, but also to be immersed in a more international academic environment. However, due to COVID, a lot of countries or a lot of schools are moving their summer programs online, or they might have just outright canceled it because there's a lot of complications in holding in-person summer programs right now. So of course, because we want that in person, we want that interpersonal connections and interactions in those summer programs, students might choose different options. It is very unfortunate, but that is just the reality right now. So definitely be prepared that you might not get that experience now that we are in a global pandemic. A lot of summer programs also cannot admit international students right now because of visa complications. I know a couple of summer programs in Japan that have decided to only host Japanese students because they cannot offer visa sponsorship right now to anyone else. So that is something that we do need to think about as well. However, I also think that other than the US or Australia or Canada, there are other countries that do offer in-person programs or are safer relatively right now considering COVID that you can check out. But definitely just be careful and be aware that summer programs is no longer, it may no longer be an opportunity for you this or next cycle.
Yeah, and actually I want to add something quite small onto that, because I've had a few students who last year applied to summer programs that were supposed to be in person, which then got moved online. And I think there are, depending on the program and what it is that you were planning on doing, some of them actually convert to an online environment in a pretty strong way, and other ones obviously really don't do that. So if you're going to do an engineering program or I think one of my students did a biochemistry program at McGill, right? And these programs, when they move online, the hard sciences I think are a lot less exciting if you're online compared to in person. But St. John's has a really cool classics summer program that's all about reading major serious literature and then discussing it. And I think that one is a little bit easier and more convertible in terms of turning into an online experience that can still be really helpful and really gratifying. So as you look for summer programs, I think a lot of them in America are probably already planning on being online this year. I know YYGS announced in December that they were going to be online. And so maybe what you need to do for yourself is think a little bit about what the program you want is doing and whether that's something that you could still get something from if it was remote, because some of them might be, and other ones definitely won't work that way, because there are some that will have really cool online options that might be worth it.
Yeah, and I definitely think that if you know someone who's been through the program, the online version of the program, reach out to them and ask them about their experience as well. Again, YYGS, there are a couple of Vietnamese students who have been. So if you know someone who's been through the online version, talk to them. Same with any other programs as well.
So I think I'm next, because the other thing we had in our list that we wanted to talk about was the trend and the increasing trend of applying to multiple countries. So I actually love students that like have it in their mind that they want to do a list of like mixing countries together, because I think it, in my mind, it kind of means that the students who are doing this aren't really focused on a particular place that they want to go to. They're not just excited about America. What they're excited about is cool programs who have aeronautical engineering, or cool programs that do like industrial design. And they're kind of excited about the academic environment and aware that there are actually really cool programs in the Netherlands and really cool programs in Australia. So I liked this anyways, but I think it's increasingly important and increasingly something that maybe Vietnamese students are considering, because we're watching the world stage and kind of trying to figure out what's going on. The only thing I would say, I mean, I think it's a great thing to do. So you get a thumbs up from me for that. But the only thing I would say is that you have to be really careful to do a lot of research in advance about the application process and the deadlines. If you're someone who's really familiar with US applications, then you know about the Common App and you kind of know how the deadlines work. But the Canadian system works very differently than that. For example, if you want to apply to McGill, as I mentioned before, they'll list their deadline as January 15th, but Canadian deadlines actually have a two-stage process where you have to kind of submit an initial application and then wait 5 to 7 business days. And then you get into the portal and have to start uploading your stuff. So if your deadline is January 15th and you don't know that, you do that initial application on January 12th, there's absolutely no way you're going to make the deadline. So knowing that Australia is going to be yet another system and the Netherlands is yet another system, and that their deadlines are at different times throughout the year, means that you're going to have to be a bit more careful about your planning, and you better get out that day planner or that iCalendar and like set everything up, because it can get a little bit hectic to keep all of those even in your head and to kind of stay on top of the different requirements for each country. I do think it's worth it, especially if you're a family that's looking to make sure that you know you're going to go abroad and that you're not going to have more COVID disruptions to your plan. And I'm seeing more students come in with a US focus, but an interest in adding a few European schools or 1 or 2 Australian schools. But it's a little bit more to manage. So you got to make sure to do the research in advance for that.
Yeah, I totally agree with doing the research, because it's not just about applying as well, right? It is also about what comes after, because I know that for the UK, most of the offers are conditional, so you might need to do some more preparing or some shortlisting after where you've been chosen. So if you're applying to multiple countries, definitely look like way ahead. August or September would be a great time to just like lay them all out so that you can manage your time wisely, allocate enough time to each applications, so that you can actually hit all the goals that you've set.
For sure.
Absolutely. That's all the content that we have prepared for today. Thank you so much, Cristina and Sam, for sharing your experience and thoughts. If you can leave our student, audience today with one lasting advice, wow, that's very cheesy, but
no. Lean into it. Lean into cheesy.
What would that be? Cristina, please go first.
Okay, so of all the stuff we've talked about today, the one that I think I want to emphasize most, the one that I talk about all the time and that my students are probably really tired of hearing me talk about, is this idea of being mindful of your priorities and your plans and working towards that. I think especially if you're in a class of 40 or 50 people, many of whom are studying abroad, it can get really, like all the noise can get really overwhelming. But like those short-term and long-term goals of yours need to be yours. The plan that you make needs to be about you and what you want. And thinking about that and then putting it all together is something that you need to kind of you need to keep at the center of what you're doing. And I think if you do that, not only will it help you be more successful in your applications, but I think it's going to help you have the experience will be more rewarding and more growth filled for you, which I think kind of connects to Sam, what you probably want to talk about.
Yeah, so you all know all I want to focus on or emphasize is growth, because I think that's really important, right? Whatever stages of our lives we're in, just think about how you can move forward. Think about what will facilitate growth and how you will be able to embark on your journey as an individual. Yeah, just focus on your development. Think about, again, your values, your priorities, what matters to you. And every decision that you make, ideally, would be in contribution to that, right? To what you really hold dear to you. So same with applications. Officers will really be able to see passion transpire, right? And admission officers and everyone around you would be able to see your authentic, your sincere passion for interest in certain things, because it is shown, it is illustrated in your growth. So whatever you're doing, your SAT, your ACT, your school coursework, all of that, think about how you can grow from it. Think about the knowledge you can get, the interests you can develop, and just have fun. Have fun.
Thank you, Sam. I think those are, one of the, I think, honestly, I really resonate with those advice, because whatever you do, you really need to think and be mindful about your growth, right? And then let's go to the Q&A. I finally opened the Q&A. I saw some very interesting question. But let's go to the serious one first. Now, Quang have asked, is ACT now a priority over SAT? Since I've heard rumors that SAT or SAT2 can become optional for some school. Cristina, do you want to take this question?
Yeah. So when schools go test optional, what they're talking about is the standardized test, which is the SAT1 and the ACT. So if a school has gone test optional, they're optional for both. So the shift to the ACT, if you're thinking about the SAT versus ACT, that's a different question than like whether you should take a test. My general advice for Vietnamese students is that even schools that are test optional generally like to see the SAT or ACT if you can produce it. If you do well on it and you think it represents you well, you should submit it, because it's going to be another thing that you can show them. So my general advice is take it if you can. But that's true for both tests. So the SAT versus ACT question is just more about the style of the test and the things that it includes. Most of my students don't love the ACT because even though they're really good at science, the science section of the ACT is a lot of reading comprehension. It's a lot of content and you have to read it quite fast, and you do have to have science knowledge, but it's about logical thinking and critical thinking at a high speed because it's in a testing environment, and they would actually most of them would prefer to do the SAT instead, because it's sort of simple math on one side and then the reading writing on the other. I don't know how Spark Prep, what your students are like with this, but what I generally do is I recommend that you take a practice. If you're not sure, take a practice test in both, see how you feel about them, see how much of the test makes you stressed out, how many of them you don't know. We would call that like a cold score, right? You haven't prepped for it at all, but you're still sort of thinking about how the test feels, how long it takes you to do the whole thing, because that's going to tell you a little bit about how long it's going to take you to get to the score you want in the time that you want. What do you guys think?
Yeah, so actually, you have hit some very good notes about that. For students who haven't really prepared for any of the tests and you just start, your test prep journey, our advice is always to take a full mock test in both, and see, not just like what you get afterwards, but more how do you feel? Because the ACT, the pacing is insane. I also did a mock ACT test recently, and even, I'm quite confident with my math and reading, but I was out of breath. and just doing it.
Oh no.
So for ACT, I noticed that some students who are very good with time pressure, they do very well on the ACT. But if you're not, too confident with doing many questions under like not so many minutes, then probably SAT. But to know for sure, definitely do a full mock test of both. Sam, do you have anything to add on for this?
No, I think you guys cover it all, but just to drill it in, just do the test, because it's different for different people. So just feel it out before you commit to one.
Great.
One of the students actually, I just saw a question. Somebody asked about like, if English isn't one of their strong suits, should they do the ACT? Because I guess only 1/3 of it is technically focused on English and the other 2/3 are STEM. Again, I think you'll know when you take the practice test whether it's going to be viable for you. But if you're worried about your like reading speed, I think the ACT is actually going to stress you out a lot in terms of time, because even though the science section is science, you are doing a lot of reading comprehension in that. And I would imagine that the SAT might actually be easier. Because often students who have lower levels of English or who are still like a little slow with their reading comprehension don't find the paragraphs of content in the science section of the ACT to be better than paragraphs of content in the reading comprehension section of the SAT. So the easy answer for both is take the practice test and see how you feel. But I'm guessing you might actually like the SAT one better.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with what you just said.
What's
Great.
next, Zoe?
So our next question is, I find that some schools in Australia do not accept TOEFL. Is it prevalent for university in other countries other than the US? What should we take between TOEFL and IELTS?
Sam, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll just jump in real quick and say that what standardized test you take depends on where you're applying to. Like you already mentioned, some schools in Australia don't really accept the TOEFL. In the UK, for example, they accept exclusively the IELTS. In the US, both IELTS and TOEFL for some schools are accepted. Some schools only accept the TOEFL. So it really depends on where you're applying to. Thinking ahead, because if you're in a public schools in Vietnam, it is very likely, most definitely you're going to need to take an English proficiency test. So if you're someone who do need to do that, think ahead, way ahead, where you might potentially apply to. If you're applying exclusively to the US, I would say the TOEFL would be good enough. But if you're also applying to the UK, I would recommend the IELTS, because that might work for both countries. So it really depends on where you're applying to. Plan ahead, and if you have more questions, send us some follow-up questions.
One of the things that I've found is that the UK is quite firm about their IELTS requirement, and some Australian schools are quite firm about their IELTS requirement. But even the schools that, and there's a couple exceptions, but the majority of American schools that list just TOEFL on their websites actually take the IELTS as well. You just have to reach out to them and say, and like confirm that that's true before you spend any money to send your scores. So the TOEFL is the American test, but if you're doing a mixed list between the US and Canada, I would say, or the US and Australia, or the US and UK, the US and, yeah, if you're doing the US and anybody, I would probably go with IELTS, because your chances of having a problem are much smaller. And most of American schools now are being really open to different English tests, just like a lot of them have added the Duolingo option because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So if you're thinking a mixed list is your plan, or if you're not sure where you're going and you have to choose one before you actually figure out what country you're going to, my instinct would be to err on the side of IELTS, because it's more likely that an American school is going to accept the IELTS than like a UK school is going to accept TOEFL. You should also think about the two tests and which ones like resonate with you. I mean, I don't know if you guys, how long ago it was and which ones you took, but I've actually taken both tests and just like to see what they were like. I much prefer the IELTS test over the TOEFL, because sitting in that TOEFL like room with the little headphones on, like trying to do the speaking section while there's like 40 other people sitting around you, all talking at the same time, is like the most anxiety provoking thing that I've experienced. And I'm a native speaker, and I was a TOEFL teacher at that point, and it still like gave me like a small aneurysm. So I like the IELTS better for that reason as well.
I agree. I also did the IELTS purely because I didn't want to talk to a computer. I wanted to talk to a real person,
Yeah.
Which is why I took the IELTS. But definitely, same with the SAT and the ACT, feel them out, do practice tests, ask people about their experience, try it out yourself before you like actually commit to one.
Right.
Yeah. And because Cristina mentioned this, but I also just want to touch on it, is Duolingo. Many colleges now do offer your test result from Duolingo, and it's free, I believe.
Almost free.
Almost free. Much cheaper than IELTS or TOEFL. So if you are, also interested in like how to best save your money while you're preparing for those, certificates or exam, do give Duolingo a look and see if your targeted school accept that.
So actually, one quick thing about Duolingo, because I had a really fascinating conversation with a Canadian university about this. So in the US, when you're applying for a visa, the only paperwork you actually have to, like, once you get your I-20 from the school, you're basically set for your visa interview. You have to bring some other documentation, but that's it. You don't actually need a TOEFL or IELTS score for your visa interview. You need it to get into the school, and then the school will issue you the I-20. So if you're going to America, a Duolingo is going to be fine because the school will accept it. And then because the school issues your I-20, you can get a visa. However, when you do a Canadian application currently, they are still listing only the IELTS or like IELTS or TOEFL as the document that will get you a Canadian study permit. I actually don't know what the UK does about this, but I'm guessing it's quite similar. So there is, when you're looking at language tests, and this Duolingo is actually kind of having this battle right now, because now that so many schools take them, they're trying to kind of take the next step and have the governments accept them as well. But there's a difference between the English requirements for your application to school and the visa that comes after it. Now for America, there's just the English requirements to get in, and then that's kind of it. But for some of the other countries, they may actually ask for proof of English score when you apply for the visa. So it can add a little bit of complexity to your life.
Great, thank you. Well, Zoom has submitted a question twice, and I also saw this question in the registration form. Does it require IELTS certificate for a student who is studying in high school, US high school, more than 2 continuous years?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
How's that for an answer? The worst and most like less helpful thing that I can give you. Some schools have their own policies about this. Some schools require 3+ years, like 3 solid full years at the time that you apply. So if you apply in December or in November or in January, they want it 3 years before that. Some schools have 2. Some schools will waive your requirement if you have above a 600 or a 650 on the SAT. So the quick answer that I want to give you is that unfortunately for you, you're going to have to go school by school and kind of assemble your list and then look at each of them to decide whether you need it. For the students of mine who are in this situation, because I have a few kids in the US every year, we pick the list first, and then we go through and see if the 2 or 3 year is like requirement is met, if they have the SAT waiver, and then if not, we usually do Duolingo at the end there because it's just a couple schools and it saves you a whole bunch of money. Mm-hmm. What about you, Sam?
Yeah, I definitely agree. Sometimes it's the only answer I could give as well, because you do really need to do your research. Different schools have different policies, and for a lot of school, 2 years is sufficient. You don't really need to submit one, but some school ask for more, some school ask for less. So check them out, like actually read on different school policies and everything else before you commit to not or do taking the test.
Great. So next question, I guess Sam, you can answer this. I'm currently interested in, I'm assuming they're saying Northwestern and not Northeastern University.
There is a school called Northeastern.
I know.
So I don't know which one you're
But the
referring to.
spelling suggests Northwestern. Can I get in with a 3.7 GPA and a 7.5 IELTS?
You know what? I don't know. Because here's why. Having that's 3.7 is a great GPA, and so good job on getting your grades that high. The reason why I say I don't know is because your grades and your standardized test score is not the only thing that admission officers are looking at, right? That's why they have essays. That's why you can talk about your extracurricular activities and a lot of other things. So having good grades mean that some schools do filter for certain grades. Like if you get below a certain level, like they might not consider your applications. So having a good grade is good. It shows that you can be in a rigorous academic setting and do well. So that's great. But there are other factors that schools look at as well. So I'm sadly not an admission officer at Northwestern right now. And even if I am not the only one who decides. So I'm sorry, I cannot give you a definitive answer, but yeah, it's a great start. That's all I can say.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. We have this, somewhat broad question, actually going just right back to our slide, is how to develop different facets of who you are. Sam, Christina, who wants to take this?
Yeah, so going back to what we talked about earlier, I think both Christina and I talked about this, but values is an important term as well. Like asking this question, you must have recognized yourself that there are different facets of who you are, and those really hinge on your values as well. What means to you, like what matters to you, and I think that really sit down and reflect, think about experience that you've had that really bring you joy, have, formative experiences, moments where you feel like, oh, this is great, I'm happy with who I am in this moment, in this experience, and try to develop those. You can start from there. And of course, there are other ways, there are other places where you can explore, but sparks of interest, you can start from those. Christina, you want to add anything?
I think you're pretty much hitting the nail on the head. I think a lot of students in high school sort of spend this time, especially in the early years, like 10th graders, are like, well, I don't really know what I'm interested in yet, right? And exploration of the areas that you think you might like, starting from like simple things like the sports clubs that you're in where you play soccer or squash on the weekends, all the way through to like what kinds of volunteering you might respond to and you might like, and then trying stuff out and seeing how you feel about it is actually one of the important things to be doing in 9th and 10th grade. When we talk about volunteering at my office, we think about categories, right? So are you like excited about working with animals, or do you care about the environment, or are you interested in kids and like helping kids learn and work, or are you interested in issues like poverty or old age and elder care? Like these are different things. So like reflecting on what you care about and what values you have and what kind of communities you want to spend your time with kind of helps you think, okay, now what skills do I have that I might be able to share? So that's how students kind of start to explore things. And then usually from that, you kind of figure out some stuff that you didn't know you were interested in, and we can kind of go, feed off of that to like learn a little bit more. So it's not like we have a list at the beginning of 10th grade that is all the things that you will explore. It's more that you are sort of slowly unpacking yourself and unfolding things and trying them out and seeing what works. Sometimes you try something and you're like, turns out I actually hate that thing. I don't want to do this anymore, right? This is a language I thought I wanted to learn and it's not my deal, or I thought I wanted to learn how to draw comics and it's actually a lot of work. Like sometimes you try something and you don't love it, but that's actually just as important as a process of self-development as trying something and figuring out that you do like it. Like as someone, I mean, I'm 35. I've tried a whole bunch of hobbies that didn't turn into things that I like really spent a lot of time on. But the way that I found the things that I do love is by that exploration process.
Yeah, I agree. I just wanted to add a little bit on that, right? It is a trial and error process, and Christina mentioned skills. I think that you can also start from skill set, like the skills that you have. For example, if you're really good at painting or drawing, you can try out like drawing comics, fine art, sculpture, things related to that particular skill that you have, and then see if you like them and see if you want to spend more time on those things. That is a way as well. But yeah, definitely it's a process of exploration. We don't know definitively since the very beginning. So it's going to take time for you to really figure out what you want to do.
Great. I'm going to choose a few questions that, our students have submitted prior to, registering for the event. So a student asked this. I'm pretty confused about the differences between applying for a scholarship versus filling out financial aid, because I've heard that getting financial aid is quite hard while scholarships are limited. Thanks in advance. Christina?
Okay, I want to volunteer for this one. I know that financial forms are like the most boring part of the application. So I don't know what it says that I actually like filling out all these details, but I do believe that it's really important to do well. And this is one of the places where like being really careful and thorough is really important. So first, let's talk about scholarships versus financial aid. If we look at those two categories, one of them is primarily merit-based and the other one is need-based. So financial aid, we think of that when we're focusing on US applications as funding that the school is going to give you because you prove that your family doesn't have enough money to afford to pay the full cost of tuition. So if your family's total income is $25,000 a year, there's no way that you can pay $80,000 a year for college. So they're going to ask a whole pile of questions that you're going to have to fill out with your parents because you definitely don't know any of that yet. And that information is put into a really complex formula that varies a little bit school by school. And they use that to calculate something called the EFC, the expected family contribution. So that number is pretty similar across all the different schools, even though their formulas are a little bit different. And it is what they sort of think that you can pay based on the information that you give them. So the things that you have to submit usually have to do with your savings, your parent assets, your house value, what your parents make from their jobs, any rental properties that they have, all that stuff they're going to ask questions from. There are two main forms that you will have to fill out for that, but then there's also some documentation that you'll have to submit. So I actually start working with parents on the financial aid applications in like July and August, because it usually takes some time to gather materials. And I don't know if there are any parents in the room here, but mom and dad always stress out about filling financial forms. So don't approach them on October 20th and tell them that you need to fill out 35 pages of financial aid applications, because they're going to be very upset with you. This is something that you should do in advance. Schools will determine your EFC, and for some students, if your family has a higher income, they may decide that you actually can afford school. So that number is something that they kind of get to decide, though they ask you what you think you can pay in that application. So the financial aid forms should be filled out by your family and you and your parents, but you should be getting advice from someone, hopefully, on doing that, because they ask a lot of very specific financial questions that the average teenager, when translating for mom and dad, probably cannot explain. The different types of bank accounts that you have and how they affect your financial aid outcomes is something that's a little bit hard to explain as a teenager translating for their parents. So work with someone or get some advice from the school, or try to find a way to make sure that you're getting good advice about financial aid paperwork, because it can make a really big difference. The second type, I'm going to go now back, is to scholarships. Scholarships are mostly based on your qualifications, and we're going to put that under the umbrella term of merit. Sometimes those are purely quantitative, right? That's the SAT and your GPA and how great you are in those two categories. But we would also count like leadership experience and extracurricular experience as merit. So all the different things that make you great are things that can bring in scholarships from the school, and many schools will give you a financial aid and scholarship offer that combines together, right? So if you qualify for a leadership scholarship of $20,000, and then they look at your family contribution and they say, okay, we're also going to give her $15,000 in financial aid, they kind of smush them together to be a total package. Not all schools can give you financial aid. So if you're an international student with a foreign passport, it's really important to understand whether a school is actually going to even consider you for financial aid. A lot of the big public schools, like I'm from Vermont, the University of Vermont, the University of Minnesota, the University of Michigan, they have financial aid for American citizens. But if you're a foreign citizen, you only qualify for merit scholarships with these schools, not for the need-based financial aid. So doing some research about that, or working with someone who can kind of help you understand it, is really important, because not all the schools are going to be asking you for those financial details.
Yeah, thank you so much for that detailed, distinction. Sam, do you have anything to add on to that? Or should we move
That's
to
everything.
Great. So there's this question, a student asked, I'm studying quite good maths and science. What job should I apply for studying in the US? I think they mean major.
Yeah.
Yeah, what major?
I mean, I think that there are a lot of majors that you can choose if you're good at math and science, and if you want to continue doing math and science, right? Because that's something that we want to consider as well, is that, oh, you're really good at certain subjects in high school, but would you really want to continue that in college? Is a question that you need to ask yourself and that you need to be able to answer before committing to a major. The good thing about US university and colleges is that a lot of them offer the liberal arts system, which means you don't have to commit until a certain point in time in your college career. So you are allowed to change, to explore things before you have to declare. So that's great. Again, there are a lot of subjects, a lot of majors that you can do with your skills in math and science. You can do, I think Cristina used aeronautical science or engineering. Earlier, you can continue with math. You can study physics, chemistry, bio. You can do engineering. You can study combinations of those. So a lot of schools offer a variety of subjects. Some have more, some have less, but you will definitely be able to find a major with math and science in it. So yeah.
Yeah. And I think sorry, Cristina, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to add on to that like one of the things I would recommend thinking about is whether you kind of consider yourself someone who likes applied learning or like the more theoretical stuff, right? If you're interested in like, if what you really like is abstract math and what you really like is abstract physics, right? Then the traditional disciplines of like math or physics or chemistry or bio like might actually be better. Like they might be the like direct majors that are really good for you, but there's a whole bunch of really applied majors like engineering, like data science, that are like you don't have access to in high school, that you don't get to try out yet. So first of all, you should be exploring those in your free time, whether it's in online classes or in even in like your research about the different majors. I would look into those because they are options that you don't quite know about yet. But it's also one of the reasons that if you're not sure what you want to study, the US is actually my favorite like country to recommend, because it's the one where the whole first year is kind of spent exploring. And even if you go in as a chemistry major, they're gonna encourage you to take classes in environmental science and biochemistry and chemical engineering to kind of explore the related majors that are connected to the thing that you think you might want to do. So the bit I want to add is that like think about whether you're an applied person or a theoretical person, and then pick a major, like do some research about the majors that relate to that, because there's way more options than you have in high school, right? You guys all study what, 12, 13 subjects, but there's like, even the small schools have 40 or 50 majors. So there's some exploration to have.
Yeah, thank you. Those are, really some good points for the student to consider while making that decision. We just got some, more question in. So Sam and Cristina, please, take charge if you want to answer this question. I really like art. So is there a way to turn this passion into a strong point in my application?
Yes. do a creative portfolio. If you want to be taken seriously with any kind of an art, and I don't know what kind of art this person is interested in, but you have to do a creative portfolio, and they are a awesome thing to do over the summer. Like, it's a great way to spend some of your time. You get to spend a lot of time producing the art that you supposedly love. So that's really cool. But it's also going to help schools understand your level of professional like creativity. Whether you plan on being someone, I think it would probably matter more if you were doing communications or like creative industries or graphic design than if you were doing engineering. Well, actually, no, it would matter for engineering as well. But if you were going to do a major that's totally unrelated to that, it may have a little bit less weight, but schools love to see creativity. So get working on your creative portfolio and make sure you do research about each individual school's portfolio requirements because they vary school by school. Sam, what do you think?
Yeah, and in addition to that creative portfolio, I think that you can also do other activities with your interest in art. You can, I talk a lot about research because I really like research, but you can do a research project on arts. You can you can join a club. You can do a creative project with friends. Yeah, again, I don't know what kind of art you're talking about in particular, but just whatever you're doing, just take that interest a step further. There are opportunities for you out there, both individually and in groups, for you to explore this interest more and turn it into something even bigger.
Great, thank you. And then a new question got in. I take interest in very different majors, computer science and fine arts. Should I choose or combine them?
That's totally up to you. I think that if you want, if you want to do both, that is definitely possible. I remember back in high school, I wanted to be an astrophysicist and an English teacher at the same time. So I came into college thinking that I would do both. Turns out later on, I really was fully invested in English and stopped my investment in astrophysics, but I definitely think that it's possible. A lot of my friends do. I have friends who go do business and art history at the same times. So it is possible for you to do both. You can also combine if you think that's possible. For some people with majors that are related, they can combine it into a project or even like a independently designed major. But for a project that you think that is difficult for crossovers, you can do both. I would say.
Or you can do one as a major and one as a minor.
Yeah.
Let's go on to this question right here. What job can I get in Vietnam after graduating from global communication major? Cristina, can you take it?
I think communications degrees are pretty applicable to a wide range of jobs. And what I would probably recommend if you are interested in global communications is that you look at companies that are focused on a global audience or that have branches in other places, because the global parts of your communications will be put into better use that way. I know working for major companies is maybe a bit more challenging than starting with small ones. So you may end up working with just the communications part of your degree first and then kind of building up from there. But communication skills and communications degrees are in increasing demand because teams are, most companies now need teams to sort of manage their image and the way that they communicate with the world, that like the marketing, the media and communications that they have to do on a daily and weekly basis. So I think it maybe depends a little bit on what industry and field you're interested in working in, but communications jobs with a degree from abroad are definitely something that I think will make it possible to find options. What do you think, guys?
Yeah,
I agree. I think that communication is very applicable. So.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Sam. Hello.
Oh, that's all I wanted to say. Do you have anything else to add, Zoe?
No, because honestly, it's not just your major too. It's also what skills you have. And the job market is constantly evolving. Maybe there will be jobs in 4 years that do not exist now. So listing out specific is rather unnecessary and not important. It's like focus on the skills, the transferable skills.
I'm going to feel really bad if the person who's asked this has already graduated, but because like this will be less helpful for you. But what I recommend to all students is that you start thinking about what kinds of jobs you want in your second and third year of school. And that way you get advice from the faculty that you know and the people who you do internships with and the career advisors at your school about like figuring out which kind of industry you're interested in working in and what kind of position you're looking for. That's actually a really important part of your education, not something to decide like after you come back. And I studied economics and sociology, so it's very different, but conversations with your academic advisors and your mentors while you're in school about what different things you can do with a degree in sociology was an important part of how I figured out that I was interested in economic development and education policy, and how friends of mine who were also in sociology realized that they really liked human resources and like organizational sociology, which is much more of like the business side of things. So there's so many options within any major that part of what you do in year 3 and 4 is kind of bring those into focus and talk to people about it and get advice about how to put that into practice and how to make it happen. So hopefully the person who asked this question is in like year 3 or 4 and can go back to campus and get lots of advice on that.
Yeah, thank you, Cristina. Well, we have 10 minutes left to our webinar today, and I do want to bring out this question from the list. A student asked, how can I do research on possible schools and make a list of schools to apply? Cristina, do you mind taking this?
Sure. The school list is really important, especially if you're a student who has like a low EFC or has needs a lot of scholarships, because what schools you choose is therefore is sort of a lot, like you're taking bigger risks, and you want to make sure that the majority of your schools are going to have a good shot at giving you the kind of finances that you need. So when you're doing research about schools, I like to look at a couple of different factors first, and that would be like the academic programs they have and how suitable those are for you, the social environment and how well it matches with how you know yourself and what like is an environment that's going to help you kind of grow but also be your best self, and then whether the school has the support system in place that you need. And that can be interpreted as academic support but also financial support. Building that list should not be quick. It should be something that you work on over, my students, it takes us at least probably a month or 2 to pull together a list of schools that sort of meet all the qualifications that we're looking for. And it's often a fair amount of self-reflection. But most students that I talk to in Vietnam, depending on how much money they need and how risky they want to be, apply to between 12 and 18 schools. In the US, the lists are usually quite long, and you need schools that are safe, you need schools that are matches, and you need schools that are reaches. And those are both, safety, match, and reach is something that is quantitative based on your GPA, your SAT, but it's also something that's that takes into consideration how many international students are going there and how much scholarships do they have. It's a complex thing. So what I usually recommend is doing a lot of research about the incoming class and like what the application rates are for them and how many international students they took and how much financial aid they have. And a lot of that information is kind of, you have to do a lot of internet digging. So don't plan on doing it quickly. For some families, and this is the last thing, and then I'm going to turn it over because I know I'm quite chatty. Every family has different priorities, right? So if you're a family that's really financial aid focused, your school list is going to look a little bit different than a family who's really focused on schools that are going to help students get internships. And that will look different than a family that is really focused on schools that have high name recognition back here in Hanoi. It's not that there won't be schools that overlap on all of those lists, but the priorities that you set for your family are really important and will make the list look a little bit different. So having a conversation with your parents and with whoever is advising you about what your main priorities are, and making sure that the list is a reflection of those and not just a whole bunch of schools that like your friend's uncle told you is good because it's in the US and it has engineering, is important. Because especially if your priorities are financial aid focused, like you need to be quite careful. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I definitely think that financial aid is very important. And apart from that, I think that some personal preferences, you know, you need to also consider those. For example, do you prefer big schools or small schools? Do you prefer public or private university, national university, or liberal arts colleges? Do you like, you know, schools in urban, suburban, or rural settings? So those are all the things that, you know, some people consider when they're looking for schools. So for example, I know I have friends who, back when we were applying to college, I had friends who just wanted to go to big cities. I went to a high school in on top of a hill that was 30 minutes away from civilization. So my friend just wanted to go to big cities because they turned out they didn't really like rural settings. Or I had friends who, personally, I was interested in medium-sized to small universities. I didn't like schools that were too big. So those were the ones that I was mostly looking at. So ask yourself those questions when you're looking at schools as well. Like, what is the major that I'm interested in? And does that school have that particular major to like that particular major, and are they good at it? Do you prefer big school, small school, in cities or in towns, etc.? So questions like that.
Yeah, thank you. And then the next question is, Vinson asked this, what should I take into account to decide whether to take double majors or one major and one minor? Good question.
Cristina, do you want to answer this or should I?
You can go first if you want.
Okay, so well, I think it depends on a lot of things. The resources that you have. For example, do you have enough time to complete all the requirements that the double majors require? Are you equally interested in both and would be equally willing to invest in both? I think, yeah, those are the two main things that I would encourage you to consider before you make your commitment. But if Cristina has anything else to add.
Yeah, what I would say is that your ability to double major is different at different schools. And that I've had a lot of the bigger universities tell me that, and tell students openly, that if you want a double major, you may end up actually staying on campus for an extra semester or an extra year, because the amount of requirements for the two majors can come into conflict and make it really hard to graduate on time. So if you know you want a double major, this is actually a key question that you can use as you look at schools to see if this is something that like is going to be possible there. Because I know some of the bigger schools will tell you, listen, we love having students double major, but they almost always end up doing an extra semester. And that's an extra semester of spending money. So like it's a big if that's important to you, I would probably not apply to that school. I was actually a double major, double minor because I was that kid in college. Shocking. But I was also at a liberal arts college that was really flexible and helpful and supportive. And one of the things that will determine whether you have the time to make this happen is whether your majors are related and have any overlap, right? So when you look at sociology and political science, it's like a Venn diagram. There are some classes that will count towards both majors. And that was actually true of my minors as well. So it ended up being quite strategically easy for me to fit all of that into a 4-year degree, but that would not have been true at the University of Wisconsin, where I went for graduate school, where they basically discourage double majors because it ends up taking more time. So I think Sam's points are like the questions she's asking are a little bit more like internally focused, like, is it actually the right thing for you? And mine's a little bit like, is it a practical possibility at the schools that you're going to? But they're both really important questions, because if you decide yes to Sam's question, it is something that you want to do, then you need to put that into action with like, is that going to be possible at the places that I'm looking at?
Yeah, just to build up on that, Cristina, is, for example, I did my major in mechanical engineering and I have a minor in math. So the reason why I only did a minor in math was because the engineering curriculum is so heavy already. And when you go to your academic advisor, they would tell you it's almost nearly, at least for my school, impossible for you to do double major engineering and anything else. So the only thing they can allow me to do was like a minor. And even then, like math and engineering already have some common ground. And actually I had some semester I have to take extra like 2 or 3 classes to be able to graduate, you know, in 4 years, because as international students who rely on scholarship, you know, our time is limited. So that's, Christina was very right, is like find out about the requirement in your school, you know, talk to your academic advisor. That's very important when deciding major and minor. Okay, we have 2 minutes left to the webinar, and I think we can go to.
What about like the Van Sonley question?
Christina,
I think that one's a good one. Yeah, so this question is, from your experience and your view, how important is GPA relative to essays and portfolios and interviews, assuming that we want scholarships? Great question. It depends on what you want to study. I have the students I see who are applying to creative majors. I would say your music or your art portfolio is probably the most important thing. And though they will like to see a good GPA because they want to see that you can stand up academically while you are doing the work, your creative potential is the thing that they are most focused on. However, if what we're talking about is creative portfolios and interviews as a supplement to a non-creative major, like if you wanted to be a psychology major or an engineering major, then definitely your GPA and your GPA in subjects related to your major is going to be more important than that when it comes to scholarships, right? You know, when you have the 13 subjects that Vietnamese students study, the literature GPA is not going to matter as much as math and physics is if you want to be an engineer. And though they will be excited to see a creative portfolio and it will add color and like personality to your application, it's not going to outweigh a GPA that is either like that, you know, that doesn't have the things that they want to see. GPA is probably the most important because it's something that takes so much work to build, and it takes years to put together. So it is probably the highest level in terms of importance. What do you guys think?
You know, it's absolutely, I absolutely agree with you. You said it very well.
Yeah.
Okay, last question, and I picked this one because next weekend many students here will be taking the SAT. The question is, what are the things I should do before the SAT test? And my aim is 1500 and above. Christina, Sam, any thoughts?
Sam?
Okay, so things that you need to do before the SAT. I mean, practice. I think that, I mean, being in the real testing site will be different from doing the test at home, right? Because there are other external factors that you don't have when you're just taking your test at home. So practice, be familiar with the types of questions that they're going to ask. I mean, I'm sure that you're already familiar by this point if you're taking the test. So make sure that you're familiar, make sure that you're comfortable. I mean, I recommend that you practice, but like seriously, the answer that I would like to give my students is just get enough sleep. Make sure that you're comfortable, that you're not sleepy in the testing site.
Eat breakfast.
Eat breakfast. I remember when I had to take the SAT, I had to wake up at 5 a.m. To travel to the testing site, which was 2.5 hours away. So definitely get enough sleep, eat breakfast, drink water, make sure you're comfortable, make sure that you're not like freaking out because you've forgotten your calculator at home or something like that. So prepare in advance, prepare the night before, make sure that you have all the materials, all the required tools and paperwork with you to prevent unnecessarily stress on the day of. Apart from that, just, you know, do practice and yeah, don't worry too much.
I want to add that it's really important that your practice is not just on the content of the test, but on the timing of the test. If you're doing practice tests like once a day for the 3 weeks running up to the SAT, but you're letting yourself go 10 minutes over there, the efficacy of that practice is on the content, but not on the timing, and timing is part of the SAT. So you have to make sure that you actually are creating the same time stress that you will have in the test in your practice. And on top of that, especially since a lot of the classes in town that teach the SAT divide the test into 2 parts. So you're spending one day of the week on reading and writing and another day of the week on math. Your practice, some of your practice, not all of it, but some of your practice needs to be in a 3-hour chunk of time. Because if all of your practice is in an hour and a half, you're going to get accustomed to like the energy and stress you need to handle an hour and a half worth of test. And then you're going to be exhausted at the 2-hour point because you won't have actually practiced sitting down for 3 hours and going all the way through it. So it's sort of like if you were going to sign up for a triathlon, you can't just practice each of the individual skills. You have to practice squishing them all together and being truly miserable from start to finish. We have to do the same thing with the SAT, right? Like it's a 3.5-hour test, or 3 hours and whatever minutes. You need to have some of the practice that you do be from start to finish with the time limits and with the same amount of break time, because otherwise you're not actually practicing the environment that you're going to stick yourself in next weekend.
Yeah. And just, to add a final point, this I tell my students a lot, Spark Prep, is that 2 weeks prior to the test date, try to set like a, routine, sleep early, wake up at the time that you would wake up on the test date, eat breakfast, right? And then maybe warm up with a few math questions, and do that consistently, 2 weeks prior to the test date. And then during the test, if you are someone who is, anxious with exam and you get kind of panic, stop for a second and take a deep breath in and then resume with your test. So, you need to prepare for the material, yes, but also trust that you have the materials within you. Yeah. And then, just be calm and ace your test. Well, that's all of the time we have for today. Thank you so much. And to our students who are taking the test next week, good luck. If you do have any follow-up question, we would be sending out an email. So do, take our contacts from there and ask us away. All right.
Yeah. If we've left anything out, or if we didn't get to your question, please don't take it as like we skipped over it. There's just quite a few in here that we don't have the time to do. So definitely, please feel free to reach out to all of us.
Yes. And then last thing is that we do record this webinar. So if you want the recording, when we send the follow-up email, you can request that. That is all. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Cristina. Thank you, Sam. Love the session that we had today. Everybody have a nice Sunday evening. Bye. Bye.